Hey guys, welcome to another episode of Overload the Middle. Today, I'm going to chip into this debate that's been going on online for the past week or so, and that's Sesko versus Gyökeres and which one is a better fit for Arsenal. Now, before I give my personal opinion, I just want to do a bit of a deep dive analysis on both players using FC25. We all play FC25, and uh, in terms of stats, they're probably up. They're definitely up there with the likes of Football Manager in terms of their accuracy and in terms of giving you that real life feel of a game. I have to admit, this debate is very has a potential to be incredibly divisive. It already is divisive, judging by a lot of the comments and views on Twitter. I mean X, and all across social media. It's almost reminiscent of uh, Biggie versus Tupac. In terms of who's the better player, basically. To be honest with you, my initial thoughts, from last season, it was Gyökeres all the way. If you'd asked me about this debate this time last year, I would have said my top three would have been Isak, Osimhen, and Gyökeres. Now, for whatever, obviously we know Isak is totally unavailable. Newcastle have made the Champions League next season, meaning there is no way in this world we are getting Isak. And even if we were, we're not going to be paying that 150 million that Newcastle are quoting. So that leaves Osimhen and Gyökeres. Osimhen, I feel sorry for this guy. I really do. A few seasons ago, he was leading Napoli to their first league title in donkey's years, and he was one of the hottest properties in football. Last season, he was supposed to go to Chelsea. Everything looked like it was going to happen. And then what did Chelsea decide to do? They decided to lowball him on his salary. I don't know whether a lot of people know this, but he was very, very close to going to Chelsea. You know, if you look at it this way, Napoli wanted him out. Um, he knew he wasn't getting love from Napoli. They'd already brought in Lukaku to replace him, and it was just a question of if. Sorry, it's a question of when, not if, I should say. And at the last minute, Chelsea decided to give him some pittance of a weekly salary. I think, if I'm not mistaken, it didn't even touch 100,000 a week. That's how low it was. It was under 100,000 a week. I can't remember the exact number. So he decided to go to Turkey, and everyone knows the level of the football in Turkey is not great. And although he's been banging in the goals, don't get me wrong, he's more likely this summer, sadly, to go Saudi. Not sad. I mean, obviously, it's great for him because he's collecting the bag, and it's a very, very big bag going to Saudi. However, the problem is that I really thought he would have been great for the Premier League. He's got all the attributes. He's probably one of the best headers of the ball in world football, hands down. If you look at his stats against some of the top strikers, he comes up top on heading. Um, okay, his finishing could be a little bit more clinical. He's got a lot of criticism with, especially when it comes to playing for his country, and when he was playing for Napoli, that sometimes he'd miss like easy chances. But 9 times out of 10, or so maybe 8 times out of 10, he's banging them in. And at the time, I was like, there's a reason why no one wants to touch him. And recently, I found out that it's because of his it's because of his nightlife. The man likes to party, and we all know what happened with Arteta and Aubameyang, and I know Arsenal don't want that kind of player from a personality profile. He doesn't want the type of player that isn't gonna fall in line and isn't gonna um, basically be a disciplined and be a good character, not just on the pitch but off the pitch. That's why there's no way in this world Osimhen is going to Arsenal, and that's why if you think about how dire the striker market is, it's you might as well call it sewer. at the moment. Even if you compare it to the strikers that were around, within the last, I don't know, 10 years, 15 years, the striker market is abysmal. Um, and especially available strikers that are on the market, it's not that great. So that's why no one's really touching Osimhen, and that's why he's probably gonna, as I said, collect the bag in Saudi. So at the time last year, that only left Gyökeres for me, and I was always wondered why Gyökeres was not getting the kind of love that I thought he'd be getting from other parts of Europe and the Premier League. Now we know how poor the Portuguese league is. We we only have to look at Darwin Núñez as an example of what can happen to you if you believe the hype too much. We know that Darwin Núñez for Benfica, he smashed it. I can't, scored probably I think 24, 25 goals that season. Absolutely smashed it. But when he came to Liverpool, as we know, basically he turned into a donkey real quick. Let's just put it that way. And Liverpool are now in the process of trying to get him out this summer. So my thinking about the strikers, I've been giving it a lot of food for thought. The Let me now go into like the pros and cons. I'll come to Sesko in a minute, but I just want to touch on Gyökeres because for me, Gyökeres was the obvious target. You look at the amount of goals that he's banged in. Now, yes, as I said before, the Portuguese league, I should say, isn't the most strongest league in Europe. So then I turned around and looked at what was his numbers in the Champions League, and I believe he scored I think 6 or 7 goals in Champions League, albeit a few of them were actually penalties. He scored a couple against Man City, I remember. And when he scored his hat trick, and so you know what, the Champions League is probably gives you a better gauge of where he is. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, let's say at best, he scored, I don't know how many goals this last season. He scored a bag full of goals. So let's say he gets 25, or anywhere between 20 and 30, let's just say. That's still a good return. And especially that he's coming in now between the 60 to 70 million pound mark. That's a very good, for me, that's a great return. However, some major limitations to his game that we can't ignore. It's just impossible to ignore. The first thing to take into account is his lack of heading ability. Now, of all the goals that he scored last season, not one of them was a header. Not one of them. He's the kind of player that when you watch his highlight clips, there's a similarity to his goals. His goals require him to, more often than not, be on the counter attack, to attack large spaces, and to basically slap them in the back of the net, in and around the box, or even further from distance. So my question was, how would he be good? How would he fare against low blocks who pack the 6-yard box, pack the defensive line, 2 banks of 4? How would he actually manage in terms of hold up play, being able to overcome the challenges of a low block? Because our biggest challenge in the last couple of seasons has been, teams don't want to play against us, especially the mid-table teams and teams below that. They're not trying to they're not trying to step up to us and take us on, and go blow for blow because they know they're gonna lose. So what do? Park the bus, they low block us. For me, he's the type of player that would need a Sesko next to him. And he's not the type of player to be a lone striker. Space that he's afforded in Portugal, he's not going to get it in the Premier League. He's just not. And especially if he's playing in a system where Arsenal want to have a lot of possession. Teams like Man U, teams like any team that plays counter-attacking football, even Tottenham, um, would do well with him because obviously, they play a lot of counter, and he would have the space to run into and banging goals. And not being funny, I'm not seeing Arteta change his style of football for one player. It's just not going to happen. So then the question remains: why are Arsenal still interested in Gyökeres? What are they thinking? Because after saying what everything I've just said, we've now recently learned they put in a bid of just under 60 million. I think it was 57 million, which got rejected recently as of this recording. And so it's not, you don't bid for a player if you're not serious about purchasing the player. You don't bid for a player if you've already if you've already got the player to make a verbal agreement of them joining you. So what's their thinking behind Gyökeres? Because we know, right, he's not going to be the player to play against low blocks. He's not going to be the player to be effective in leading the line. Now, my thinking is this: we've talked about we've talked about needing a striker and a left winger. I'm thinking my thinking is I believe Arsenal are trying to get both Gyökeres and Sesko. I don't think it's either or, and I feel like we've been hoodwinked by the media, by just the noise of people thinking it's one or the other. Look at it this way: where we just come out of a season where we've had no strikers. Yeah, we we've already experienced what it is for Havertz to get injured and not have any backup. Gabriel Jesus, we're not going to see him until the new year, and even when he comes back, he's not going to be the player we remember. Even he's not going to be the player that we remembered who banged in a hat trick against Crystal Palace around Christmas last year. He's not going to be that player, and I can see him basically getting sold next summer. His contract runs out in 2027, so next year he'd only have 1 year left on his contract, and I'm not seeing Arsenal renew his deal anytime soon. So the idea of needing two strikers isn't far beyond reach, and I think is actually sensible because what we want to do is, we want to have options. We want to have options from the bench. If for whatever reason, one striker is, not on form, injured, um, or just the type of opposition that we're facing, we should be able to select a striker for that particular opposition. So, for example, Sesko to me would be a great striker against the low block opposition, so mid-table and below. Even though he can do it against pretty much anyone, and especially I would say, as I said in the last video of Rodrigo versus Nico Williams, I see Sesko in the next 2 to 3 years, actually not even 3 years, I would say in the next 2 years, literally being in world class conversations, and people talking or even having a debate at that time about whether he's world class or not, because I feel like his ceiling and where he is now at 22 and where he can go in the next couple of years is actually frightening. It's actually very frightening. Getting in both players will give Sesko the time to develop. If Arsenal only go for one player, he's always going to be judged against the other player that's been debated, right? So if we get Sesko, there's going to be a divide at Emirates, and people will be like, if Sesko don't start banging them in from day one, people will be like, we should have got Gyökeres, and there's going to be a divisiveness in the fan base. I think it's already started, to be honest with you. We've got the Sesko camp and we've got the Gyökeres camp, right, within the fan base. So for me, if I'm looking at it from a smart position, take both, have both. Gyökeres is the type of player that naturally, reminds me of Thierry Henry in a little bit, where he naturally gravitates to the left, right? He does his best work on the left, cuts in, slaps him in the back of the net. Yeah. So why not have him being also an option as a left winger? I don't know if personally myself, I haven't heard anyone talk about this as an option because I feel like with Arteta, we know how much he loves multifunctional players that can play not just in one position but in many positions. Sesko, to my knowledge, is just a bona fide target man. That's all he is. Even though I feel like he's got the technique, especially with his dribbling, to play on the wing. Um, Playing him on the wing is wasted because of just how tall he is. So he's always going to be better off playing up front. But with Gyökeres is the type of player that can play on the left wing. If you look at his dribbling, 83. Okay, the passing isn't exceptional, but to be honest with you, if he's playing as a winger, the main attributes, as far as I'm concerned, is your pace, which is 91, his shooting, which is 87, his dribbling, which is 83, his acceleration, which is 89, his agility, which is 83, balance 79, attacking position 88, vision 80, strength. He's got all of the attributes to be the left winger we're looking for. And the beautiful thing about him as an option is if we look at his defending is only 40, right? But his strength and stamina is in the 90s. So he's going to be the type of player that's going to be able to get back, track back, knock people off the ball with his strength, get the ball back, win back possession, and then be able to simply pass it on to the midfield and then work the ball up the pitch. The fact that he's got the ability to cut in on either foot, because he could play left wing or right wing, to be honest. But we've got Saka on the right, we've got Nwaneri on the right. So he's got as you can see, he's ambidextrous. He's good on both feet. So I can see him, with his dribbling, with his shooting, with his pace, being an absolute menace to any defense in the Premier League, and he has the freedom and the space to do his best work, which is working in dribbling in spaces that are a little bit more open. He doesn't have the responsibility of holding up play, of bringing other players into the game. He doesn't have that responsibility. He has a responsibility to beat a man, which we know that he can with his dribbling, to cut in, to shoot, and to basically be a physical menace. One thing that this is what I said. One thing I mentioned in the Rodrigo versus Nico Williams video, which if you haven't checked out, feel free to check out, is that the reason why I wasn't a fan of either of those options was that they were lacking strength. They're great technical players, don't get me wrong, but their physical numbers and their strength numbers were low. They were in the I don't know, I think 40s on physical and 60 at best on the strength. But we're looking at someone with a 91 strength and a 91 physique. Yeah, physical. So defenders ain't gonna be able to bounce him off the ball. If we look at how many times Martinelli, good as he is, he gets bounced off the ball because of the lack of physique. Right. So I feel like Gyökeres is a great option at left wing, and whereas last year Sesko wasn't, when the news broke last summer that Arsenal were trying to buy Sesko, my initial response was, "What for? Why do we need this kid?" Because at the time he was 20 going on 21. Yeah, so why do we need this kid? What's he bringing to the game? And I have to admit, my respect level for Sesko has gone up incredibly. I feel like he's a very unique player that has a has a ridiculous amount of techers for someone who's 6'5". Someone who's 6'5", you expect them to be slow, lumpy, um, you know, and this guy, he could play on the wing. He's got the dribbling to play on the wing. Okay, his passing isn't the greatest at 70, but again, that can improve. And he's got the pace to play on the wing as well. And that's another thing. Seeing even playing with him, seeing somebody that is so tall and so quick, it's such an anomaly. You don't see that every day. You don't see 6'5" people playing with the sprinting speed of what's his sprinting speed now? Of his pace of 87, a 6'5" player with an 87 pace. Where do you see that, guys? Where? I've never seen such a tall player who's so fast. All right, he's 2-footed. I'm currently doing a career mode, which I'm gonna actually start putting on the channel as well. And I've signed both players, as you can see, Gyökeres and Sesko. And my experience of playing with them both is that Gyökeres, as playing Gyökeres as a striker, his problem is that he gets easily crowded out. He hasn't, even though he's strong, it's 91 physical. Um, he hasn't got the presence. I think that's the word I'm looking for. He hasn't got the presence to be more of a nuisance and a physical nuisance to defenders. Whereas Sesko's got that presence. I feel like even before a ball is kicked, Sesko is intimidating defenders just because of his height and stature. And then when he's running on the ball at pace, you know, it's going to be a case where we can't outrun him, we can't outmuscle him, and and he basically we can't. That anything that they try to do, they can't because he's got everything, and even though he's got a lot of development to do, he's got the basics of everything. Let's just put it that way. And so for me, I feel like it's been a long, long time since we've had a striker that is a good header of the ball. You know, yes, we've had great strikers in the past, but I feel like probably gonna show my age a little bit. The last, for me personally, the last striker that was a great header of the ball was Alan Smith, and we have to go back to the late 80s, early 90s. If you guys were supporting or watching us at that time, to appreciate him, he was the one that scored the winner in the Cup Winners' Cup final against Parma in '94. And we've had great strikers like Ian Wright, Anelka, Henry, Van Persie. Actually, no, tell a lie. Giroud was another one. Giroud was probably our last striker who was a major threat from the air. That's the one that I would say, Giroud. Giroud was the last, you know, tall striker that had that physical presence. So since then, yes, we've had strikers like Aubameyang, um, Jesus. I know there's a debate whether he's actually a striker or not because many people see him as more of a cam or as a winner, but he's officially a striker. So we haven't had that threat for quite a while. So having a player that has that area of threat, but also has the threat on the ground as well, you know, you have to buy him now because if you don't, it's gonna be an Isak situation where we could have bought Isak. What year was it? 22, 2022. We could have got him for like 60 million, and we decided to go for Jesus, sorry. Um, and look where Isak is now, and look where Jesus is now. And I'm not trying to throw shade at Jesus. Injuries happen. It's just part of football. But we know there's no argument in terms of who got the better deal. It was Newcastle that got the better deal. So Having said all of that, I can see a world where Gyökeres will play up front for games that suit him against teams who like to play the high line. Tottenham come to mind. If they still have Ange in charge, well, let's see what happens. Other teams who try to go toe to toe with us, your Liverpools, your Cities, those teams that will push up against us. I can see your careers being used for those games, and also I can see him being used as an option on the left. So having both Sesko and your careers playing up front, as well as being able to rotate with Havertz in games where Mikel Arteta sees fit. So, in my mind, having three strikers is a minimum requirement. You can't run a league campaign, a Champions League campaign, uh, League Cup duties, FA Cup, create any kind of FA Cup run with two strikers. You just can't, because once you lose one, you're only left with one. And in my book, one is a dangerous number. And so my suspicion is that Arsenal are actually trying to buy both, because, as I said before, you don't go as far as making bids and offers to teams, and as well as making sure that you get verbal agreements from both players if you're not trying to sign both. Why would you do it? And I know there's been a narrative that, oh well, we're going this far with both just in case one of them falls through. If you're at this stage of the negotiation, you know that you're confident enough to get that player, or else you would pull out of the deal. It's like when we're playing career mode and we're negotiating for a player, right? Once we know that we know that we're around the ballpark of getting a fee for the player, and we've already got the agreement from the player that they want to join, I don't see how that deal falls through unless you decide to pull out yourself. So for me, them going this far with both players, it would be cruel at this point for Arsenal to turn around to one of the players and say, sorry, we're not picking you because we're picking the other guy. At the point where you've actually got a deal agreed with, you have a fee agreed with the club. So I believe, anyway, we'll see what happens, but I believe they're going for both players. And I believe they see Gyökeres as a left wing option, because at this moment in time, there aren't any strong links on left wingers at the moment. Yes, we've had the Rodrigo links, but recently he's been making noises that he wants to stay. You've also had the Barcola links. We've also had the Eze links, but for me, those are just rumors at the moment. There isn't anything concrete about them at this moment in time for me to suggest that they're gonna pull the trigger on any of those options. So, guys, I just want your kind of, I want to get your take on it. Do you think Arsenal should get both players? And also, can you see Gyökeres as being the left winger that we need as well? Leave your thoughts in the comments. It's been real. Much appreciate every love shown, comments, likes, subs, all of that good stuff. And until next time, take care. Peace.